Hi everybody. Thank you for attending this meeting. I'm really excited to be here. I'm sure everybody from our side is really excited to be here. So let's start with what I'm going to present here. So basically, this is the result of work that we started about, I think, 6 months ago, and we published this work in 2 conferences. So the first one is me, Heidar Pirzadeh, Amir, and the other one is Sarah Shenyan, who's my wife. So we published this work in the conference. The name is Automated Software Engineering Conference 2014, and it was in Sweden. So let's just jump into the work. So as you know, you might know, the early 2003, a guy named Menon started a study to see what is the cost of UI changes. So basically what he found out, based on a number of projects that he studied, medium-sized and big-size projects, industrial ones, he found that about 60% of the development cost is related to the changes that we make to the UI. Although it might not be completely the UI changes, but they're somehow related to the UI changes. Then, as you know, wherever we have changes in the code or in any part of the application, we usually create tests to make sure that this new change hasn't caused a defect, right? So the thing is that the focus of this work is on the UI test. For me, the UI test, when I say UI test, I'm referring to this type of test, which one of them is, like, let's say, user flow tests, or the business scenario test and the system test. So we are not focusing on small tests like finding if a button is somewhere or not, finding if a label is somewhere or not. So those are not high-level tests. So these are the idea is that we will, at the end of the testing pyramid, we will have a number of tests that make sure that the business of the application is still intact. It is still working as it's supposed to work. So we call those things business scenario tests or user flow tests. Now the thing is that based on his study, he found that these tests usually are really brittle or fragile, because any changes that you make to the UI usually breaks this type of test. And the result was that after each release, even if it's a small release, if it's not a major release, 70% of those tests become unusable. What it means is that you have a release, and then you're going to run the test to make sure that your application is still working, but the thing is that you will find out that 70% of your tests are not working anymore, which doesn't look really good, because it cannot tell you if the application is working, because the problem could be with the test. So then many other people started working on the same issue, and like Mark Brechen in Accenture and people in IBM, and they found similar results. So basically, whenever there is a small change, the test results become useless. This was like 1 year ago at Hybris. So we had a team. The name of the team was System Team. The idea was that to centralize a number of things, number of tasks in the company, and give it at the end to the system team. Things like release and system level testing and things like that. So basically, we had big suites of tests that were supposed to run at the end. And because there was so much detached from the actual development, at the end of the release, when we wanted to actually give it to the market or something, when we run the test, you see, like, this is basically 100% of the tests are failed. So what do you think? What happens when you have this situation? What is the problem that you can see? Not the problem why the tests are failing, but what will be the impact of this thing?
Well, you can't release if your KPI is dependent upon your automation saying everything is okay.
Okay, so one thing is that we cannot release, but then what else? I mean, what is the social impacts of these things? I mean, if you have a test that is failing all the time.
Well, it's depressing.
It's depressing.
Useless.
It becomes useless, then people lose their trust on the automation as a whole thing, right? So nobody can trust it. I mean, it doesn't bring your confidence. It doesn't do anything to your company. It doesn't make it higher. So that, for me, that's a big issue, because then you're putting people on fixing this thing every release. They're working full time on it. So we're paying for those efforts. The output that we have is a test suite that is failing all the time, so it cannot guarantee a good release. And at the same time, people lose their trust in the test suite. So this looks like a big issue. Now, just to go to the presentation, I decided to have two themes for this presentation. The first one is about asking a wrong question, and I will be asking at the end of this theme. I will be asking, what do you think about what is the wrong question that was asked? So we have two personas. One is the left-hand side, Homer. He's not working at the nuclear plant anymore. So he's working at a company. The name of the company is autorent.car. So basically, they had it's like enterprise. So you can go to the site, you can pick up the car, you can search for the car that you like, and he's in charge of automating the test that they have. So he's somebody like me. And then on the left-hand side, on the right-hand side, we have this Homer with glasses. He represents the automation support community, the people that you can find in Stack Overflow and Stack Exchange, I guess. Those kind of forums and blogs, and basically he represents the community. So these two guys, we will use them in our scenarios. So let's say this is the first scenario that we have. Let's say, forget about the right side. We have on the first page of this website, we have a drop-down menu. People can go and press the drop-down. They can select the car that they want. They can press the lookup button. And basically the test that we want to have is to simulate this thing. Now on the right hand side, just to make it a little more clear, we have the HTML representation of the same thing. So if you're familiar with that, the vehicle is the same thing. Select represents the drop-down menu, and these are the options that we have in the menu. So so Homer started writing the tests for this using Selenium. He thinks it's really easy. So he says, first I come up with a locator, then it returns me an element in the page, and then I do click on it. And this is a locator that he found. So basically, who understands this thing? Okay, so for the next 40 minutes, I'm going to make sure that everybody understands. I'm not going to do that. So the thing is that here we have 4 options. So basically, he wanted to click on Audi. He's saying find the 4th option, which is option number 4, and then this will be the element that we want to click on, and after that he will just do a click on vehicle locator. So as simple as that. So he's really happy. He started automating this thing, and he created, I don't know, a number of tests. But after a while, they found out that those are not the only cars that people are really interested in. So they added fiat because people were interested in fiat. So they changed the position of the element. So of course it will fail because we were looking at the fourth element. Then another change that could happen is that they switch the elements that they have. So instead of having Audi at the 4th, they switch it with Apple. And then another one is to remove an item from the name. So he's really sad because all his tests failed. So he's saying, what do I do? What do I do? And then here's the community. So what does the community suggest is that, okay, instead of making it relative to the structure of HTML, just use the element IDs. So basically what it means is that instead of using option 4, find an option for which the ID is Audi. So then it makes it independent of the position of the element. So it will basically, what it will happen is that all those tests will pass, and he's really happy, and he thinks that he has solved this thing, and then another change happens. So the other change that we have is that they found that from the usability side of things, having a drop-down menu needs 2 clicks, because you need to click on it first and then selects an item, so they thought that okay, we replace it with a set of radio buttons. So conceptually, it is doing the same thing, because at any time you can select only one of those elements, right? And then you can click the lookup. So what is happening here is kind of a UI refactoring. The same concept that we have refactoring in code. So basically the input is kind of the same, the output is kind of the same. It's just the internal thing that has changed, and we are providing the same functionality. So, but again, the test will fail because he was looking for select elements, which is the drop-down menu. And the community suggests, okay, maybe you could change the type. So instead of using select, now you use the radio button. So, but the problem is that day after they introduce another change. So instead of having the lookup button, now they have a search button. So what I'm trying to get at is that the concept of the application has not changed. The business has not changed. It is still the same notion of selecting one element and finding that element. Go ahead.
I'm not a developer, but XPath is extraordinarily powerful. It's almost like a language unto itself.
It is.
You can design very, very smart XPaths that, I mean, are you about to get to that? Is that
No, go ahead. I'd like to hear that.
Well, I mean, for example, I faced a similar, I don't want to talk too long, I know what you're thinking, Ziad. We faced similar problems before, and basically you just have to write smarter code. So there is an XPath formulation, for example, that allows you to say, what is the field 2 fields over from your text, for example, and that's how I solved this problem. They kept moving stuff around.
That's great. That's for moving stuff. If the type of element changes, what do you do?
If the type of element changes, then usually what you do, or what I have done, of course there's no one answer, but let's say you have lookup changes to search.
No, I'm talking about the drop down to radio buttons.
Then you really have to come up with a new solution. But actually the radio buttons for me are simpler than the drop-down menu, because the drop-down menu tends to be dynamic with its object IDs, and the radio buttons will tend not to be dynamic.
What I'm trying to get at is that, but if you had a test with drop-down menu, if the change is swapping the drop-down menu
with a radio
button,
right,
then you need to go and change your test.
Right, you're right.
Right? So, but basically what happens is that first your test will fail, you will run the test, it will fail, and then you will need to maintain the test, right?
Right,
You will need to go and pray. And for the period that this test is failing, you're not increasing the confidence again, you're putting more time on it, and everything. So, then, go ahead.
But in general, if you do test automation in parallel with the development, so you will bound to have these issues. Normally, test automation is recommended as a regression test. So only when your application is slightly stable, so then you go for an automation, or else like during development, concentrate on manual testing.
Yeah, that's a good question. Are you doing the waterfall model, or
No,
are you
it
doing
is
a
completely
Scrum-based? Okay.
Yeah, but that's a perspective. I'm not sure if it's good to continue with manual testing and leaving the automation for the end, if that is your suggestion.
No, what normally we practice is after the release 1, so we take all the test cases and we automate it. And when we go forward for release 1.1 or 2.0, so that we concentrate for the current release for manual testing.
These are the UI tests that you're talking about? Okay.
UI as well as we even automate web services as well using SAP UI.
Okay, that sounds a little waterfall to me. If
That's not how we do things in our team, but every team's a little different here.
No, it's not about being different or not. It's
No, it's cool. Look, the thing is that we should do things that work for us, right? If that model works for the application that you're working on, or
so
for the
basically
team.
one of the thing is we want to reduce our frustration.
We want to reduce your frustration. Yeah, the best thing is let's see how you dealt with
Cool.
this. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
So then the community is also, there is no answer from the community if there are changes like that, because basically you need to go and change your test. So now I'd like to know, what do you think about this? What was the wrong question that was asked?
Was there? a
You
question
don't.
asked?
Well, there was one question that was asked, right?
What to do when things change so drastically, or in form?
It is not drastically, is it?
Well, it's a dog becoming a cat. I mean,
It's not. That's
the
what.
drop down is completely different from the purposes of automation than the radio buttons.
Forget the automation, right? But why do we need to find? What is the goal of having an automated test?
So
I
his,
think
his premise is going back to the business need has not changed.
because we like to find defects, right?
Right.
So is there a defect here?
No, it's a false positive because there's been a change in the development.
Yes, but
You'll get
those
a
are
false
internal.
positive from your Selenium.
For me, those things are internal, right? From the user side,
No,
the
it's all
end
business.
user
Yeah.
is not experiencing any defect, right?
There's no defect regarding the business scenario there, because this is probably user has to search or look up for OD, but maybe also your PO might have defined that the mockups should look one way or the other. So I don't know how you cover. Say that the mockup was supposed to be a drop down, and then the the developer forgot about it and put the radio button.
Okay. So if you know that is a completely valid point. So if you remember what we talked about was that these type of tests are the business scenario tests. So we're not. This is not concerned with the small changes like what is the type of things, because those things need to be checked when you're developing things.
Sure, but you still need to get through the step in order to get your whole business. I mean, obviously this is not what you call a show-stopping issue, but you
your
can't
test
get
is
to the
failing,
next
right?
part of the test unless you get through this part of the
Exactly.
test.
So your test is failing. So if whatever test that you have and it was based on finding that element, all of them will fail.
Right.
Okay, cool. So the only question that was asked was what do I do? What do I do? How do I fix it? Right.
Oh.
Right. So what is the correct question to ask it?
How do I keep this from happening again?
Okay. What? Any other suggestion?
Is it still doing what it's supposed to do?
Okay. That's a good one too. We will get to that, but I just want you to think about what is a good question to ask to help us with our next move.
Is this the right way to be testing this functionality?
Okay, so let's just continue. Maybe we get there. Maybe after the second theme, we can find. Maybe we can. All of us could be on the same page when we are at the end of the second theme. So let me just quickly go to the second theme. The second theme is what happens in real life. So let's say Homer was working at this company, and the day is done with his work. He's going home. He's driving, and his car breaks. The car is broken, and then he doesn't have the phone number of the company, so he cannot rent the car. So he calls Lisa, and he asks Lisa to go to the website and to select Audi and search. Right. So what he does is that choose Audi and search. So now the thing is that for whatever scenario that we have in the site, if it's this one, which is Audi is here, it's change of position, or it's the other one with the complete change from lookup to search and all those things, Lisa can still do it, right? What did Homer tell her? It was just choose something and search, right? So now now the question is that if the user can do it, how is she doing it? So the question is, how does Lisa do it? Now, there are people who work on these type of problems. There is this lady is Carol Kultavo, and she's a professor. They're working on information seeking processes. So they find out how people find things. So they try to find out how human mind works. And also there's David Bliss. So these guys, both of them, they work on it. So these are the models that they have. This is Elise model, and basically from I'm not going through the model. So there are two main things that happens when we are trying to locate things and find things. One is that we always try to reduce the search scope by selecting a relevant area. And the other thing is that we're trying to distinguish the point of interest. Let's say, and to help you with the whole idea, we can always think that we're telling somebody on the phone to do something. So if I'm telling, let's say if I'm telling Amir to go, what is the name of this room?
Marie Curie.
Okay, I can tell her to tell him to go to Marie Curie, and then I want him to pick up the mug. I can tell if it's, well, there is more than one mug in this room, right? So I can tell him that go and, I don't know, get the mug on the first desk on the left, right? So basically what I'm doing is that first I'm trying to reduce the search scope, right? If I tell him on the desk, if the other one was not on the desk, you're picking it up now that. So there is only one mark on the desk. So the area would be the desk, and what is distinguishing the object is the name of the object, which is the mark, right? So I can tell him two things: what is the area, and what is the things that is distinguishing. So any type of search that we do, any type of location that we do, uses those two kind of strategies. So now let's go back to a scenario that Homer wants to do. Let's say we have one page which has two forms, and we have two forms on that page. One is a login form, and the other one is a registration form. Now, if Homer wants to use the same strategy to write a test, two strategies again, finding the selected area, so reducing the search scope, and the other one is to distinguishing the thing. So he will say, in login, for username, put John Smith. So basically that wouldn't be ambiguous, right?
So coding-wise, you'd say in the block that is identified as login by its ID and its class.
Let's
search
not get
for
to the
the text.
No, we're just talking about the strategy.
Okay.
If I want to tell you to go to that page, I will tell you two things, right? I will tell you where to go, so to reduce the scope, which is the login, and then what to do, which is what to find the element which we are interested in, which is the username, and put John Smith. So now the thing is that these can also support negative tests when the actual defects happen, right? So let's say if we had a login form that didn't have the username. So if Homer tells Lisa on the phone that in login for username put John Smith, she will say, but there is no username for it, right? That is an actual defect. Now, another scenario would be to have, let's say there is some sort of mistake, so username is here and password is here. While this field, it shouldn't be like that, I mean, it's not written correctly, but this is the actual username, and this is the password. So the developer made a mistake, and they
use positions to identify the fields instead of the field text or something like that.
If we have really good tests, what happens is that forget about this. We like to find the username field. So the username field usually has an ID,
right?
Which is the, let's say, UID, and the other one is PID, right?
Sure.
So what happens is that a very well-designed test will pass, while it shouldn't, right? You agree?
Yeah.
But in the sense that
unless the test is looking for the order of the field texts, yeah, it'll pass.
yeah, but that is not good, because what they're suggesting is just to go with IDs. If you follow the strategies that are being advocated by Google, make your tests stable, go with IDs, right?
Just IDs.
Just IDs.
But in HTML5, IDs often change.
Yeah, that's another issue. But the strategy is to go with IDs, because then you're making it independent of the positions and everything, right? So that type of test will pass here, because they will correctly enter the username in the first field and the password in the second field. I'm sorry, I need to correct this thing. 5, 6. And basically this will be John Smith. Okay, just to make sure that everybody understands. So the thing is that if he tells Lisa in login form for username put John Smith, and for passport put 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, it will not work. So we found the defect. This is, I think I just want to know if that is clear for everybody.
It's clear.
Is it? Okay, cool. So for me, are we? Should we do that again? I mean, do you have any other suggestion for the wrong question? What is a good question to be asked? Well, I think you guys mentioned it somehow, right? The good question is, instead of how I can fix it, because if you quickly ask how I can fix it, next release something else changes, and then you ask how I can fix it. So you're always fixing things, right? The correct question is, you guys, I think,
How can I make smarter
implied
automation?
was, what is wrong? So the question is, what is the problem, right? And the problem with these type of tests is that we have a really high degree of coupling between our test and the structure of the elements in the page.
Right.
And like any other coding project that you will have, you should try to reduce the coupling. So
So you want to reduce data dependence, or also UI dependence.
we want to reduce the dependency between the test and the internal structure of the page as much as possible. When I say internal structure, is that if we tie our tests to the ID, if the ID changes while the end user can still do his work, we're screwed, because we cannot do anything, because we actually tightly couple these two things. So I think the strategy would be to reduce the coupling. And then what happens in real life? Basically three things. One is that Homer didn't specify where the object is, on the page or here, as we're talking about. If we say, okay, go to this location with X and Y and I don't know, Z, which is the location of each element in three-dimensional form, then if that thing changes, you cannot find it anymore, right? So specifying things, I mean, locating things is not a good thing. You should just give specification. And then you need to delegate the location to whoever is executing the test. So in our scenario, Homer was just specifying, he was saying, go to that page, and Lisa, looking at the page, was doing the location. So the fact that we are separating these two things is really important. So just do the specification and delegate the location to whoever is executing the code. And two strategies that we talked about was de-scoping, reducing the scope, and the other one was to distinguishing the thing that you want to find. So okay, let's put this into practice. This is the framework that we came up with. So instead of going through the whole thing, I think we can go with an example, but just a high level, in the high level. So basically, for any type of any lines in our test, we'll have a generic action, a descriptor, a context, and a value. What does that mean? Let's say we talk about the same login form that we were talking about. So we say input username in the login form Johnson, right? So these are the things that we have. This is the action that we want to do, which is inputting something in the text, in the field. The descriptor is distinguishing what we want to interact with, which is the username. The context is the login form, and the value is Johnson, right? So let's say if that is our input to the framework, then first this will be given to an engine that tries to find the equivalent elements. What it means is that when we say input something in a page, it could be a text field, it could be a text area, it could be a password field, right? So what it does is, what this engine does is that it finds all the elements that you can input on. So it finds all of them. Then it passes then another thing that we talked about was, let's say, logging, right? A login can change to signing, to log on. So we have another module here, which first does stemming, and then it finds a synonym of the same of the words, right? So basically, it finds whatever value that we have here. It tries to find a synonym of those things, and so we have one set of elements, a set of synonyms, and we give it to our locator generator, which is the orange box. Now the locator generator goes like it could do an exhaustive search and match all of these things together, so it can find if the button that we want is if the form name is login, if it's sign in, if it's log on, and if the type of the elements is text, password, or text area, do those things on it. So basically, it generates something like that, which is the actual XPath, right? So to get back to your question, we don't write XPath tests. We delegate that things to this framework. So you just give it what you want, and then it generates things on the fly and tests them against the actual state of our application. So if the state of the application changes, it makes it flexible. So it changes the XPath. So now to get back to what we talked about, the only thing that we are doing here is just specifying what we want to do. The location is happening. The location is being done by whoever is executing the test again. So it's the framework. So we do nothing about it. It's just the framework who's handling it, and then the actual execution is on the application that we have. So now to see this thing in action, but our test, the line for our test would be perform input on username in the login form John Smith. And actually what the framework does is this. So it generates the whole thing, and then at the end, it sends the key John Smith to the whole XPath.
So which one is the input parameter inside the XPath, may I ask? So you have perform, you've got your four values. So where is, say, for example, input showing up in the XPath? I'm looking for it. What would be that part?
There is nothing about input. Any element that is inputable is being tested, right? So what the framework found was that here we had only what is the time? We had pre-string text, and so basically this one was only a text field, right? So what happens is that it tested it on text area, I don't know, password field and text field and everything, and it found that this one is working. So then it executes it, right?
So it's also looking for executability.
Exactly, that's what it does. So it tries to find the element first, and then it executes the test. So that's the whole thing. So I want to stop here. I just want to know if you have questions. What do you think about it? Let's just make it a little more interactive. I mean, as a discussion.
One question. So, for example, where we have the description of logging, let's say you don't have these login. So, if for example this framework where you see username more than once, what would happen?
Use a name more than once for.
Yeah.
If let's say if there is a login button and if there's a login.
There's no login. Like now, this is like if your HTML is nicely defined where you have login and everything is into boxes. Let's say
You're saying there was no login here?
Correct.
Okay, but there was a registration there?
Or just there's no registration. So let's say on pages where you see, let's say, username more than once.
Yeah, but
no way to locate.
What do you think? I mean, if there was a page with more than one username, right? And on the phone I tell you go and
which one?
For username.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. So in this case, how would you deal with it?
It cannot do it, right? It fails. The same way that the end user could fail if the scenario was that. Which I find it's a realistic thing to happen.
Okay.
Or you could simply say, choose the first one if you know where it's supposed to be, but then that
if tomorrow they
invalidates
change
your flexibility. Yeah.
Yes, like if tomorrow they change the places of these things, then it wouldn't be the first one, right?
So what language engine is this using? Because you generate it's a language based thing you generated here.
Yeah, well, it's just Java.
No, but there's an engine, there's an intelligence behind it.
The engine only creates the XPath file.
Yeah, but he's asking what is the engine?
Yeah.
Is it C+? I mean, what code, unless I'm wrong, what code are they using to generate this code?
Well, not the actual code, but what is the engine's theory? Because there's lots of different types of, automaton states and things like this. What is the theory behind this engine that you generate?
This is just a POC, right? The one that we did. So it is a simple Java program. When we call it engine, we're talking about the theory, right? So basically what it does is that it has a list of all the list of elements of HTML5.
Well, for instance,
there are
regular expressions is also a state automaton, a regular expression.
Yeah.
So are you basing it on regular expressions or some other sort of internal theory that you're building this maybe?
No, none of them. Because the thing is that the original state that you need to have is that for each language that you use, let's say it's HTML5, it could be, I don't know, Flex or Flash or whatever that you use as your technology object. So if the technology object is HTML5, it has a limited number of elements, right? Now those elements conceptually could be grouped together. We can say inputable elements, we can say submittable elements, we can say draggable elements.
Static elements.
Yeah, things like that.
But you're still passing through those elements and organizing them to say this is actually more likely to be the case than this case.
Exactly.
I'm going to have different decisions on different states from when I get to. I'm just wondering what
because the set is, I understand your question. Because the set is limited, that the type of decision making is static. So we are not using a decision making engine. If that is your
rules
question.
engine isn't behind it.
It is not. Because because you use rule engines when you think that the set will be frequently extended, or the rules that you want to extract, right?
So in other words, you haven't found cases that you've needed to actually.
Exactly.
Similar.
And it doesn't mean that it's in future we will not need it or we will not look into it. But for this state, for the POC, we didn't need that. Go ahead, John.
Okay, so you're saying this is a POC. Is it because there's nothing else like open source or any other application available?
For doing this, as far as I know, there is nothing else available.
And this was developed by you in collaboration with your wife and the university?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So the POC then, it uses brute force and combinatory math. You take your sets of elements and you basically go through them on each element until you find the one that matches.
Yes, but the set is limited again.
Right. But brute force is what you're using. You're not using a decision-making algorithm.
It could be an exhaustive search, right? So for any type of, when you have an exhaustive search, you usually have parameters to control the search. So you say, I don't know, after 50 items, if it is, because, okay, let me give you an example. Let's say if you have a login here, there are a number of things that I want to mention now that we begin. A cool thing is that you're not actually looking for this element. You're looking for the label of the element, right? The same way that we do it as humans. We never look for the input elements. We usually find the labels,
right,
and then we assign them.
Or the title of the field in its XML or something like that.
No, as an end user, you don't go there. Right?
Oh, you're talking end user.
Yeah.
Right.
So basically, we are trying to find the distance between things. So there are a number of things that we look at. One is the containment, because the login is now containing these things. The other one is that if it was not a div or it was not a table, but then you had the label login here, you could do it because these elements were coming after the login. So three strategies. One is the containment, the other one is appearing after, and the third one is the distance between the elements. So you could have login here, but then as end user you could still assign these things together, right? So these strategies, we run them one by one, but again, based on some heuristics. We say the containment is the top one.
Sure.
And then the happening after, or the appearing after, and then the distance.
So you have a total list of elements, and then you narrow down the parameters by saying what block it's in the URI.
Exactly.
In the UI.
But then we have parameters that controls this thing, because you could, for appearing after or happening after, if you have login here and then you have another form here, we say after like 50 elements, just stop the search. Because the distance between these two things is getting a lot, right? So these are heuristics.
Are you going to show us the POC run?
No, I don't have it here.
Okay.
Any other comment?
It's more a question of how robust it is. Like, because I'm just thinking if we can use it now as a POC, I'm a bit nervous to use it.
No, we cannot use it.
Okay.
It is just at the idea level. We did a POC and we ran the test on for a number of scenarios, but we cannot even call them experiments.
Okay.
Because when you're publishing these things, everything has a definition, right? We cannot call it a case study because the people that we work with were biased. I knew them. So it's not a case study. It is not an experiment because the environment was not controlled. We didn't have negative things to test against. But the only thing that we did was trials. So we call them trial. The next step could be to create a jam for this thing, and then maybe out of it we can have a viable solution that you can trust.
Could I ask, I assume you run this through your Eclipse when you're running it. Is that correct?
The Java, yeah, it's
Your-
like a
your
Selenium
POC,
test, right?
Okay. So what does the console output look like when your test fails? So, I mean, for example, very often in our consoles we've got it set up so that we can see where in the test it failed, which line it failed on, and in the case of identifiers,
It's the same thing.
it shows us whatever we use to identify the object.
It is
on the
absolutely
page.
the same thing because the only thing that it does, look in Selenium.
But my question,
Go ahead,
if in fact that's true though, your auto-generated XPaths will be quite difficult to trace unless you have a deep knowledge of the code, because you can't just plug it into XPath checker and then see the object
You don't
on the
need to
screen.
do it. You will. That's the idea. You just specify things. It generates them and it runs them against the page, right?
But I'm talking about when you're debugging what actually went wrong.
Unless if you want to debug the framework, that is a different question.
Not the framework. No. The test that's running.
That is a
So
test that you have, right?
that's the whole test.
That's the whole test. Well, that is one of the actions in your test, which is put something here. You don't write extract, you don't see them.
So if your
Basically,
test is
these
very
return-
small, then you'll automatically know what, because there's only 3 steps, you'll know where it went wrong.
Exactly.
But if you're running a golden path test through a process like log in, do this, do this, do this, do this, do this,
Then
it
it's-
can be more complex to figure out. You may know what line it failed on, but not what object failed.
Yeah, because you're not concerned with the object anymore. You will find that it could not perform an input on that field, right? Then, as you're saying, no, I totally agree with you. Then it could be a framework problem.
Maybe the XPath was wrong.
That's what I'm saying. So that is not a test problem anymore. Then it's a framework problem. Then we need to
Seems
make sure.
open another dimension of possible problems that pop up, though.
Yes,
No, but-
one dimension.
Yeah, but
your
then it's-
test, you should be fine with your test, right?
It's the same thing with any framework. It's like saying your Java framework is broken. How much do you rely on the date function, for example? If it returns you 30 and you expected 28, are you going to start testing the Java framework and saying, how come it's returned me 28? No, right? I mean, that's the premise of it all, is that you're relying on this to test. Yes, indeed. And then after that, I mean, sure. I mean, there's framework updates like anybody else, right? The same way that they update those things.
But it is a valid point, right?
I'm just thinking about the practical application. It's brilliant, man. I mean, it seems like a great idea.
Sure.
But
But
when
what
you're
I'm saying,
using it, how do you analyze what you're getting?
Yeah.
because you need to analyze your test, right?
Right.
And the way that you will be writing tests will become much simpler and much understandable in terms of the actions that you're doing, right? So you're not dealing with the extract anymore. Then it comes to how much you trust the framework, as Phil was saying. Then if we have proper testing for our framework, and it's well maintained and everything, then I think we can have a proper level of trust on that. Because again, at any, like JUnit, right? I don't know. Whatever framework that you use, it will become part of your trusted computing base, right? So I think the framework here will become part of your TC.
All right. It will be very helpful for us to see the POC in action, so that, I mean, if you could come back another time with a computer and, you know, give us a demonstration of it, that'd be great.
Sure. I think I have there are screenshots of the POC in the paper that I attached to the invitation.
Request? To the invitation, so we can
invitation.
see the paper and
Yes.
the thing. Okay, great.
You can. I asked them. I can share them within the company, the paper, because you should pay actually for that, I guess. But so that you have. I mean, you can see. But if it happens that we have another opportunity to talk about it, sure, I can show it to you on a computer, that how it works and things like that.
Nice.
So Victor, for mobile, I'm not sure. I don't know how much it would be helpful. What are you using? Calabash?
Because for mobile and browser, the difference is see the layout will change. On browser, you have a big screen. You know, we have many things on there. It's layout one way. On the phone, you know, it's maybe somehow.
Is it a native application or is it HTML application?
We call it UI5. Yeah, it's kind of JavaScript.
Does it use a DOM? HTML5 DOM? I mean, the output that you have is a DOM file? I mean,
Yeah, it's HTML.
Yeah.
okay, so then it could help.
Good, yeah.
And it's cool because if you move the same thing to a bigger screen, if the layout changes and everything, it should support it because it's independent of the layout.
Yeah.
Okay.
So basically in UX it's responsive.
Exactly.
Okay. It will adapt to responsive layout that you'll be programming to adopt. So,
Yeah, for example, you need to scroll, you know, for example, on the browser, you page to page, you right away to see that. But on the mobile, when you go to the next page, after perform this action, you may not see that right away. You need to actual ones for mobile.
Okay.
Yeah. And also, I have another question here. You talk about those action performed. You think about the validation also after the performance?
Yeah, the same assertions that you use for in Selenium. Any type of assertions that you have, you can use because everything will be in JUnit.
Yeah.
The same Selenium things that you're
So
using.
it's still
just
click, it's still assert, it's still equals, it's...
same thing.
Okay.
Consider it as a library. So instead of in Selenium you have find by xpath or by element or just by, and if you're defining the element. So consider it as an extra library that you can give it that provides you with these functions of perform, and then you give it the name of the action, and then it whether it does that thing or finds the element for you if you like to do other things in Selenium. So
solve one of the worst problems of automation there is. Just finding the, I mean, there are some IDs that are extraordinarily difficult to identify. This fixes that problem.
and then
Great.
somebody mentioned that the ID changes.
Dynamic IDs.
Dynamic ideas, right? And let's have a look. Okay, let me tell you what are the shortcomings of this thing as well. One is that if you have, because this is completely dependent on the representation of pages, right? So if you have a login button with text login, and tomorrow you change it to an image, it was trying to find the login text, right? So it cannot find it anymore because it's a text. So what we're trying to do, I know that now that we are SAP, we need to comply to a number of things.
Just a number? It's a large number.
A big number of things. So I think we need to have the alt attribute for any elements that we have so that it shows the actual text of things. So that is something that we could use. Or worst case, we should use OCR, some sort of OCR to come up with the text that we have on the buttons and everything. So
it might be possible to include operators like OR in your XPaths. So, I mean, if there are several conceivable outcomes, if you've mapped the various states of your situation and you know that there's a subset that's likely, you can say this or this or this.
That's what the
and
framework
this.
is doing.
I didn't see that in your framework example.
Because that was the end output of the framework, right? That is what is translated to. But the framework is doing that, right?
Okay.
It's ORing them, or it's doing it in the loop. So depending on the situation.
Understood. Okay.
So what I think is that this potentially can make things easier to test, easier to create. It should potentially reduce the cost of maintaining tests. It should, again, potentially increase the level of confidence that we will have in our tests. If a test is failing, it should be an event. So it's not just that the application changed and now we need to go and change the test. And is there any other questions that you have right now?
Does it take care of the globalization?
That's a very good question. So the thing is that when you say globalization, my understanding is you mean change of language, right?
Or date format, or lots of.
Or date format.
Locales, yeah.
So, because what we try to do here is to actually simulate an end user, right? If you have a tester, a manual tester, how does he test the globalization? Whether he knows the language, right? Which is a great case because he can do it, or he just trusts what is happening. He just checks the layouts and everything. But that is not my answer. My answer is that this is based on XPath, the current one that we have. And if you look at and jQuery and XPath, they have a common graph in W3. So the next step for them is when you are writing an XPath, you provide the language. If you provide the language, they will take care of the globalization. They translate the input, but it doesn't mean that it's a perfect solution. But my understanding is that it is not the testing framework that needs to take care of the globalization problem. It is an input to the framework. So you tell the framework that this is now a German language, and then it needs to support it. One way to support it is to use the next version of XPath, because it has dictionaries, it has, it does all those, it has thesaurus, it does the stemming, it has the language itself and everything. But that's a very good question. I mean, that is something that we are waiting for. I have one real world example. So this is just to tell you that the ID is a very, I mean, currently if you have a good solution, we should use ID, right? So this is March 16th, 2014. So let's say if you wanted to click on flight plus auto. So if you look here, there is an ID which is flight-hot. So if you have a very good test that is using only IDs for finding the elements, it could click on that. So the next day on March 17th, they changed the whole thing. So what happens is still they have flight plus photo, and then here in this input, they remove the ID. There is no ID anymore. So, but then apparently they found that it's not a good idea to leave it without any ID. So on September 13th, they added an ID. So the ID now is package-fh. So what I'm trying to say is that even if you use IDs, the IDs can change, they can disappear, and this is a very good company in terms of testing and development, if you know about their team. So I think those are actual problems in the world of automation. So that's it. I'm trying to finish it here. Thanks a lot for your